Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Living in the Northeast requires some source of heat. A majority of Vermonters burn heating oil, but some use gas or wood or a combination of two or more sources. But what if you could burn grass? Well, a collaborative research project out of the University of Vermont is exploring the use of a variety of grasses as heating sources. Across the Fence's Rebecca Gollin tells us more.
Roger Rainville is tending a fire that's heating one of the buildings on his farm. The pellets he's using are local. So local, in fact, that Rainville made them himself in the next room out of switchgrass that he grew. It's nothing out of the ordinary for the farmer, who spent most of the past decade trying to figure out how to grow his own energy.
I think with the switchgrass, there's no question that it could be feasible once we set up properly.
Rainville is a longtime collaborator with the University of Vermont and spends his time growing and experimenting with a variety of crops. His work gives researchers valuable information about how those crops react on a working farm.
We've got like 3/4 of an acre of switchgrass we initially put in, Sid did, and then last year he put in an acre of switchgrass. And Reed's Canary, we grow that here anyways, feed the cows.
The switchgrass you pelletized earlier made better pellets.
Rainville is working with Sid Bosworth, an agronomist with UVM Extension, who is researching the potential for using grass as energy in Vermont.
This is research looking at perennial grasses, not harvested for hay, but harvested for biomass, for energy.
Bosworth has been testing various sites around the state to determine the ability of different grasses to grow in different environments.
And this is actually a ecotype from Pennsylvania. It's performed very well in this site, which is a well-drained sandy soil. It has not performed well on our more poorly drained soils. So I'm not sure how much promise it has, for Vermont.
The research is comparing a number of factors, from soil and land management practices to climate differences between the sites. The study will look at everything from what the best type or mix of grasses is for Vermont to how much they will yield.
You can see these grasses are very stemmy, which I think would be an advantage for biomass. Usually the stemmier it is, the less ash there is. It's more like wood.
The last part of the process is to turn the grass into pellets and see how well they burn. That's where Rainville comes in.
We were accustomed to pelletizing some softer material like sunflower meal, canola meal, and we even tried, pelletizing some manure and whatever. But switchgrass and Reed's Canary is a little trickier. So we're kind of learning as we're trialing this also.
A couple of years into the study, and some of the grasses are reaching their full maturity, when they'll give their maximum yield. Some have grown well, and some haven't. And there are aspects of how and when to harvest that Bosworth thinks could have a significant impact on how well the grasses pelletize and burn.
One of the challenges with the grasses is they accumulate a lot more minerals, and so they have a higher ash content than wood does. So for a homeowner, that means emptying the ash box a lot more often. There are some stoves that it probably is not suited for. But the industry is coming around. I'm starting to see more boilers and stoves that can accommodate these alternative biomass sources.
There have been some challenges with the equipment. Some of the grass seems to bind together better during the pellet making process, and the pellet machine itself continues to need fine-tuning.
We were able to get it to make pellets, so we know that it does work making pellets. I think things need to be addressed with that piece of equipment. I think once it's addressed properly, I think it'll work good.
So these would be similar in size and shape as wood pellets that you can buy for a wood stove. However, I do want to caution that many wood stoves cannot handle these grass pellets because of the ash content.
Some of the studies have indicated that harvesting the grass later in the season could help cut down on that ash content. For a farmer like Rainville, looking to grow his own energy, grass grown on unused or marginal land could be a cheap alternative to the sunflower pellets he's currently heating with.
Sunflower meal is worth $500 a ton for feeding the cows, so it's real high protein. So if we have an alternative that works good to heat with pellets, and we can do it with the switchgrass or the Reed's Canary, we'll definitely do that.
Rainville will continue to grow, pelletize, and burn the grasses, helping Bosworth find out which ones grow best and the best way to manage them. It's a long-term process, as the grasses need to produce for at least 10 years to make the effort economically viable. For now, aside from the high ash content, the grass pellets themselves are proving that they can compete with established alternatives.
I know we fill the hopper up with 40 pounds of switchgrass or 40 pounds of wood pellets, and it runs, like 12 hours on that 40 pounds, both. So that we figure the consistency is quite the same. And we're keeping the building at roughly the same temperature. So it tells me that without doing all the scientific aspect of it, it tells me that we're burning pretty consistent as far as temperature-wise with the wood pellets.
Although these are only the initial observations and not a scientific study of the pellets, if Rainville's results are typical, then growing grass for energy could make a lot of sense in Vermont.
I think within the next year or two, we're going to have a lot of good information as far as being able to provide to farmers.
In a few years, after a few more growing seasons and more time to investigate, Bosworth will have the numbers and figures to go along with his work. For now, though, he and his partners will keep doing what they've been doing: growing, studying, and sharing information as it becomes available. In Alburgh, I'm Rebecca Gollin with Across the Fence.
Well, thanks, Rebecca. With me now is the UVM Extension researcher featured in Rebecca's story. It's a pleasure to welcome back Sid Bosworth. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So what's the potential of using grasses for biomass energy in Vermont?
Well, our crude estimates are there might be 200,000 to 300,000 acres of land that could be potentially used for growing grasses. Some of these are based on ag statistics where 20 years ago, well, in the last 20 years, we've probably lost about 200,000 acres of cropland, or at least it's no longer being used for crops. Now, some of that's gone into homes and other development, but even some of those homes might be a home on a 10 or 20 acre lot that nothing is being done around. So there's different scenarios. And another simple scenario where there's interest is buffer zones for cornland along waterways. Could those grow a biomass grass that could be harvested? So I think the potential land is there. The question is the economics of being able to accomplish that, in a very local way, because most of this is going to be local. It's got to be locally grown. You can't transport it very far because it's too expensive. This is bulky grass.
Right. And the whole point is to save money in another capacity by burning grass.
Exactly. Exactly.
So how does grass energy compare to wood or other sources of biomass energy?
Well, grass is actually pretty close to wood. Most studies have shown that the energy content is about 95% of that of wood. The BTU value of wood. So when you're burning it, they're pretty comparable in energy content. Again, the challenge is that these grasses have a higher ash content. There's more minerals in the grass. So it really takes a different kind of stove or boiler to handle these materials.
So what's the process of converting grasses into heat energy? I know we have some show and tell here.
Yes. Well, first, and I think this is an advantage of these grasses, is that they're grown just like hay crops. Some of the grasses are the same grasses that we presently grow for hay. Many of them I'm evaluating now are not. They're really different. So there's an investment if you establish this, that you're limited on how you're going to be able to market that grass. So they're grown for hay. They're usually harvested once a year, depending on the grass. It might be midsummer or late in the fall. You want to harvest them mature. The hay has to be run through some kind of hammer mill to chop it up. And then there's different ways of densifying the grasses. And densifying is important for both transportation and handling, and also even burning. It helps with the burning process. So I have some examples. Grass pellets is a term that's often used, and these are like this 1/4-inch pellets, just like wood pellets,
right.
Run through the same type of mill for making. And this happens to be switchgrass pellets here. We've made pellets with switchgrass, and we've made them with reed canary grass. And we've made combinations, wood, grass, together. That is the most energy intensive to make because you got to chop them very finely. A less intensive method is making these what's called briquettes. So the chop doesn't have to be as fine.
Yeah, you can actually, I mean, it looks like grass, obviously.
Yeah, it is grass, but it's compressed into these briquettes, and then they get chipped into these pucks.
Okay.
That are often called, and they can vary in size. This one obviously is made at about a 2.5, 3-inch diameter, and this one's a little smaller, about 1 inch to 1.5 inch diameter.
And once again, too, I guess that you'd have to use maybe a different stove than the one that you could feed the traditional pellets in?
Right. Now, some of the pellet stoves, some companies are designing pellet stoves that can handle the higher ash content. Or if you're real careful, some people are using these, but you just have to clean it more often. These are definitely designed for a different type, and probably more for an industrial type boiler. And so one of our interests is in small business or institutional type uses for these grasses.
And so how much land would you need to heat a typical Vermont home if you were to grow your own grass for pellets?
There was a study done, and I think this was a study out of the Midwest, that stated that on farmland, so I think that meant good farmland, an acre could support a typical home for, you know, both space heating and water heating.
Boy, that'd be pretty nice.
That would be nice. But now we're really focusing on marginal land because we don't want to compete with good ag land. And one, I don't think it'll ever economically compete anyway. We'll always find other crops that'll make you more money. So it all depends on the yield. And I think at marginal land where you're going to have less yield, my estimates are, at least for my home I've estimated, it could be anywhere from 2 to 3 acres to heat the home.
And so is there the potential for economic development around the use of this?
I think there is. Certainly from the landowner's perspective, it might provide a little supplemental income. It's not going to be a big money maker, but it could provide some supplemental income. But there might be opportunities for small businesses that might act as brokers or contract with landowners to come in and harvest and then densify the product and either provide that back to the homeowner for their own heating or sell it somewhere within the local, you know, grass basket, we call it.
What are some of the challenges for this technology?
There's a few. I mean, one is just, you know, the chicken egg, or just getting this infrastructure going.
Right.
But there's some technical challenges. I mentioned the ash content, and I'll show this. These grasses do, they take up a lot of minerals, like a lot of plants do. And unlike wood, where the bark is removed and the pellets are made from the core, this is the whole plant. So you get all those minerals in there. And if the stove or the boiler is not adjusted properly, you can get these what we call clinkers. It's an amalgamation of the minerals that form.
It looks like lava rocks.
It does look like lava rock. And that can form on the grate of the stove. So if you don't have the right kind of stove that's removing these, that could be a problem, or if the stove's not adjusted properly. So that is an issue. So technically we need to have, I think, stoves and boilers that can handle a wide range of these kind of grasses. One of the challenges is that if you think about, these grasses are growing under a wide range of conditions, so their fuel quality characteristics, mineral content, ash content, can vary quite a bit.
Now, how can people get more information on this research that you're doing?
Well, I have a website, and they can go to that. The URL is on the screen now. It's PSS, our Plant and Soil Science Department website. And I have some information on there and some links to other sites as well. There's work in this area going on at Cornell, up in Maine, up in Quebec. And also in Vermont, my partners and collaborators with the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us today and bringing in the show and tell.
My pleasure.
Interesting stuff. Thanks a lot. That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.